Hello there, welcome back to the Man Cave Music Academy Guitar for Dummies, also known as peer tutoring. I'm your host Daniel Wynn, and we're going to continue with our series on the guitar. And so today we're going to be talking about notes and scales, and we're not talking fish. So, yeah, talking about a little theory. We're not even going to get into reading sheet music here. At some point I may post some tabs way later on. I'm also going to post some notes that go with this episode so that you can look at a diagram of the things I'm going to show you. So let's get started. In the intro video, which I hope you've already watched so you know how to name the parts of your guitar, and I don't mean Billy and George and Sue, no. I talked about the strings. When played open, E, A, D, G, B, E. Eat all day, get big E's, Easter Bunny gets drunk at Easter. Yeah. Anyhow, so we're going to start talking about the kind of notes you can play on a guitar. So each of these things that you play is a note. Okay? I'm not going to talk about tempo and whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, that yet. We'll talk about that when we get into a little bit of a rhythm. For now, we're going to talk about how the notes relate one to another. Okay. Each of these notes, as you may or may not know, is labeled with a letter of the alphabet between A and G. And sometimes they refer to them as flats or sharps. For simplicity's sake for now, we're going to talk about the key of C because the key of C has no flats or sharps. Okay, the key of C is made up of the notes. Well, let me back up. Before we get into the key of C, let me just talk about from any place, from any, whether it's A sharp, B flat, all the way up, if you start from that note and go all the way up to its octave, and I'll explain that word octave in a minute, there are 12 notes, including the root note and the octave, and that is called a chromatic scale. Okay. So let me demonstrate. Let me start with the C on the B string here. That is a C. There you have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, D, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, back to C. These notes relate in a certain way. You notice when you play it like that, it really doesn't sound very musical, and it's not, because it's just all the tones right from start to finish. And you will almost never play a chromatic scale just for the sake of it, except every now and then, and for sometimes for speed practice. So for example, you could do something like this. All that is just a warm-up and speed drill, but you're not playing music with that. So these notes relate to one another in a certain way that makes up what's called a diatonic scale. And a diatonic scale are all the notes within a key that fall naturally within that key. And so let me give you an example. So the key of C, which I said earlier, has no sharps and no flats in it. So that include now each of these scales are going to have all the letters one time in them. So the key of C, you're going to start with your root note C, right? Who would have thought it, right? The next one would be simply D. Now you may notice, if you notice where if I press my index finger on the B string in the first fret, you don't want to put it right on top of the wire. You see how it's muted like that? You don't want to do that. You want to come down here behind the wire, so that the string is laying across the wire so you get a nice clear sound. That's a C. Okay. Then you come up here to the third fret, you have a D. Now, you might be wondering, well, why am I not playing that second fret? Okay. Each of these notes has a relationship that you can describe as steps or tones. I'm going to refer to them as tones. You want to call them steps, that's fine. But each tone, each full tone or full step is 2 frets. So from C to D is a full tone, and that is 2 frets. Okay, so if D is your second one, so first one is your C, your second note is your D. And while that sounds like I'm talking to Captain Obvious again, there's a reason why I keep mentioning these numbers, okay? We're gonna come back to that later. So 1 is C, D, 2 is D, 3 must be E, right? Okay. So once again, a full tone, two frets from D to E, from 2 to 3. Now when we go from 3 to 4, from E to F, it's 1 fret or half a tone. Okay. Now this gets into why keep talking about the number 1, 2, 3, 3 to 4, because this is true no matter what key you're in. If you start in E flat down here, right? E flat, F, G, A flat. It's the same relationship. Don't worry about those notes there, what they are. We can talk about that later, and you can figure out how to apply this whole idea to any starting point. Okay? So from 1 to 2 is a full tone. 2 to 3 is a full tone. 3 to 4 is a half tone in any key that you're in when you're starting out from the root note. So F, that's your 4th. So that means G is your 5th. That's a full tone. From G to A, which is your 6th, is a full tone. A to B, which is your 7th, is a full tone. And then we come back to C. Now I said there's 7 notes in this scale. C, let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you're like me, that ear is just begging you to go up one more. 8, but it's really 1. It's still C. It's the same note, but this is an octave. Octave, like octopus or octagon. 8, right? Well, the 8th note, which is really the same note, but at a higher level, called an octave. There you go. There you have your diatonic scale. Okay, in the key of C, all the letters starting from C all the way up to C again. Okay, this same principle works for, let's say, if we started with A. Right? It's an open string here on the 5th string. By the way, these strings are also referred to by numbers. Okay, again, I don't know who came up with this. Maybe they prefer skinny over thicker, so they started down here and called that your 1st string, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. So down here on the 5th string, which is your A, right? A is your 1. Go up 2 frets, which in this case is your 2nd fret because you're playing it open. So that in this case, your nut is acting as a fret. So 1, 2. There's your B. It's your 2nd note. Now in this case, you do have a sharp. C sharp. Right? So it's 1, 2, 3. So your 4th is going to be how much more? So you went the full tone and a full tone. Half tone, right? As you go to D. Then a full tone, a full tone, and a full tone, and then to the octave, half tone. That's going to be the same set of intervals in any key. So, all right, how am I supposed to remember full tone, half tone, full step, half step, whatever? It's not hard. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Some people think of it in terms of 2.5, then 3.5. Okay. What I found helpful for me, just for whatever reason, it stuck to my brain easier, was somebody said you start with a root, and you're going to go tone, tone, half a tone, separated by a tone, 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 half a tone, which brings right back to the octave. So tone, tone, half tone, separated by a tone, 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 half tone. So whichever way works for you. That second way worked better for me. I'm going to call them steps, if that makes it easier for you. There is no wrong way as long as you remember that those are your intervals within your key. Okay? Now, let me say a little bit about how these 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and everything relate to going from one string to another. All right, first let me note that, well, to illustrate that, let me start from E. Right? So, There's 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But let me notice something here. See this note here, which is an A, is the same as this. So when you go from this string to this string, you're going from 1 to 4. Almost every case. Let me illustrate. From here to here is 4, right? And then from here, once again 4. Here's where it gets just a little tricky. It's the one case where it doesn't work. It's only 3. So when you go from E to A is 4, A to D is 4, D to G is 4, but G to B is only 3. Fortunately, we go from B to E, we're back to 4. So you got that 1, which is going to mess up. It's not going to mess anything up. It's going to make things trickier whenever we get to a point where you're coming down, you're vertically moving this way on your fretboard to your notes. Got to remember that things change when you go from your G to your B string. Okay, that'll come up more later. So, when we want to do a scale, like we just did a minute ago, we did this. Oops, sorry, started in the B. Right? There's another C down here. Right? Now we could do this. Okay? But you're going to find a lot of times you want to go this way. Okay? This is horizontal. This would be vertical. Okay? So if you want to keep your hand down here in what's called the first position, and you're starting there, you can simply come like this. So you have your C on the 3rd fret of your A string. Then you have your open D. Then on the 2nd fret you have an E. Now remember, now we're going to go from E. So it's 1, 2, 3 to 4 is half a tone. Right? Then we get the G, which is your 5, 6. And remember now we're going from the G string to the B string. So from G to B is 3, right? G, A, B. And then you're back to C. Okay? Now if you want to play all of the notes in the key of C in that position, you have a few more notes that you can do. So you can start from the C and you go down to the B, to the A, to G, to F, and to E. And likewise from here, you can continue from the C to D, E, F, G. Again, I'll have notes on this that we'll include with this episode. So, to recap, to recapitulate, summarize, that's the word I'm looking for, yes. All right, so every key starts with a root note, and then the notes are related by a tone, and a half tone, separated by a tone, tone, half tone. You can play them horizontally like that, up one string, or you can play them vertically in one place, such as this. Root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, octave, number 8, right? You can do either of those, both work. That whole idea is transferable starting from any note, okay? So if you know that this is your E string, you can similarly do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're going a full tone. So from this 4th fret, you're not going to land on that 5th. You're going to go one more up. So yeah, don't worry about that. We can go with that in a future lesson. But the point is, the same intervals work that way. Let's start with something easier. Let's go with G, right? Right here. So that's 1. A is 2. B is 3. C is 4. D is 5. E is 6. Now you have a sharp here. F sharp. And you got the G. And if you want to, you can go another full octave. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So if you're going in the key of G, you can actually do 2 octaves in that one position, starting from the bass G and ending on your treble G up here on the high E string. Once again, it's easier to start with C because there's no sharps or flats. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between a sharp and a flat? Well, in a sense, there isn't one. So let me illustrate. Let me start with using the high E string, right? We're going to play up the chromatic scale now. So just to simplify things, and we're not talking about any particular key. Again, this is a chromatic scale that happens to be starting and resolving to E. We're going to call the sharps or flats sharps on the way up. We'll call them flats on the way down. They're the same notes. Let me illustrate. There's your E. Here's your F. F sharp. G. G sharp. A sharp. B. C. C sharp. D. D sharp. E. Now those same notes, I'm just going to call the sharps flats on the way down. So here's E, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, and E. So again, it really doesn't matter. There may be a point where it matters. I can tell you, I don't know what that point is. Okay, I have there's a limit to my understanding of theory and such. I do know there's this idea of a circle of fourths, which simply means that if you start with the key of C, right? So you go C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, which nobody plays except maybe jazz players, and then back to C. Okay, those are again no sharps or flats. But if you go up 4, you'd come to the key of F. Okay, C, D, E, F, fourth, right? Right. So again, let's look at that whole progression we talked about earlier about the tone, half tone. So let's start with an F. That's 1. G is 2, A is 3, B flat is 4. Okay, so it has 1 flat. If you look at some sheet music sometime, and I'll put this also in the notes. Sometimes you look at the first staff there. It has the little squiggly thing. Some of them are treble clefs, but anyway, you might see some hashtags or some lowercase b's. Those aren't hashtags and b's. They're sharp or flat symbols. If you see 1 flat symbol, it looks kind of like a lowercase b, that means it's the key that has 1 flat, which happens to be B flat. So again, to illustrate, so 1, F, 2 is G, 3 is A, 4 is B flat, 5 is C, 6 is D, 7 is E, and F is your octave, 1 flat. If you're to go up 4 from there, well, what did we say 4 was? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the key of B flat, right? So we're going to start with the B flat chord. Well, what are the notes for that? Well, I'm going to start down here on the G string just because I can start lower on the neck. B flat's 1, C is 2, D is 3, E flat is 4, F is 5. G is 6, A is 7, back to B flat. So you had a E flat and a B flat. You had 2 flats. So if you see that symbol and you see 2 lowercase b's or flat symbols, that means that's the key that has 2 flats, which happens to be the key of B flat. A minute ago I said that one symbol had B flat, had 1 flat symbol had B flat. No, that was the key of F. Sorry, my bad. So there. Anyway, don't worry about all that. The whole point is, when you're playing in those keys, you're going to call those notes flats. Now, sometimes you might play in another key. Somebody might want to play in the key of C sharp, which is no different than D flat, but they're going to call it C sharp. Well, in that case, all of these sharp/flat notes will be referred to as sharps. Again, that was a whole bunch of useless stuff. You really don't need to know at this point if this is where you're really starting, but I thought it might be interesting. It's trivia, it's whatever. So, to recap, you got your 7 notes: tone, tone, semitone, or half tone, separated by a tone, 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 half tone, and you're back up to the octave, which is the first note but at a higher level. You can play them vertically, you can play them horizontally, and in our next lesson we're going to talk a little bit about how these notes go together into something called chords. And I look forward to seeing you then. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.